Okay, a couple days back somebody had asked me, and I apologize for forgetting your channel, but this has been a rough week for me. Busy, and I'm going to try to get this in so that you're not just left hanging. The question was fiberglass versus steel, if I remember correctly. So I'm going to try, let me turn the TV down a little bit. I'm going to try to explain this to you because it's not as simple as you may think, because there's different patterns, there's different gains, there's different lengths, there's different wavelengths. I mean, it's just, there's a lot involved, steel versus fiberglass and so on. You know, this would, if this was in a classroom, it would probably be 2 or 3 days. One good day of getting into it, another day or so of just rounding out the edges and cleaning it up, and maybe another half a day or so of testing. You know, and there's a lot of debate. It's like ammunition, you know, guns, firearms, you know, 9 or 380, you know, 9 or 45, you know, I mean, it's you know, it goes on and on and on. It's always going to be the choice of whoever it is, you know, I mean, that's all there is to it. You know, we could take theory, and sometimes we just throw that out the window because some may or may not agree with that. You know, theories can be argued like anything else. However, I'm going to try to make this as simple as I can to make it as, well, not as quick, but as understanding, I guess. I don't know. Alright, anyway, let's start with a fiberglass antenna. Fiberglass antenna. What's the fiberglass antenna made up of? Well, you're not transmitting off the fiberglass, and most people realize that, and some that are just new into it may not realize that, because I've been asked that a few times. You know, how does fiberglass transmit a signal? From new people. Once I explained it to them, this is when I used to have my store. When I explained it to them, they kind of, oh, and then they kind of hit themselves in the head like, well, that was a stupid question. Well, it's not. You know, there's no such thing as stupid questions. You know, I mean, it's just that what one may think as being common sense is not common sense to everybody. I don't believe in common sense, to be honest with you, because, you know, what you do or know is going to be different from another person. As what they do and know. It's how they were brought up, the jobs that they hold, you know, are they book or are they actual hands-on? You know, there's a lot there. For instance, if you have a child growing up and, you know, he's starting to get to that age to where he's starting to touch things, and, you know, you say, hey, Johnny, don't touch the stove, it's hot. Or don't touch the candle, or, you know, whatever, you know. Well, it's common sense to us that the stove is hot. It's common sense. Well, you know what? The child doesn't know because he hasn't experienced hot yet. He doesn't know. So it's not common sense to him. You know? And no matter how old you get, there's always things that you may or may not know over other people. So what may be common sense to them may not be common sense to you. Everyday living, as a rule, we like to assume it's common sense, but not necessarily true. However, an antenna, fiberglass. Fiberglass antenna is made up of 3 components. You have a fiberglass rod, such as, we'll say, a fishing rod, fishing pole, saltwater. You need a thick one. You can't have a thin one. All right. But let's just say you have a fiberglass rod. So you have a fiberglass rod. Naturally, that's not going to transmit anything. That's just a rod. That's a tool. That's an element that's going to hold what else comes with the antenna. Then we have something that's called a flange or a stud type mount. Now I got to get an Allen key, so excuse me here. I got to walk away from you. You think I'd be prepared for this? No, not me. So let me find an Allen key. You can see I'm well organized here, huh? Oh, goody. This looks like it might be the one. Well, I'm wrong. Oh, maybe it's not a metric. Maybe it's, there we go. Is that the one? There we go. I gotta loosen up an Allen screw here. There's two in this one. Now, I'm using this to try to explain something to you. Normally, an antenna company would not use something with set screws in it. What you're doing is you're taking a flange, a piece that's going to screw into the mount. This is a 3/8 by 24 thread. That screws into most of your mounts. That's a standard thread. Alright. Then they take a fiberglass rod and they stick it into that mount. Now they press fit everything in there, so they're not using Allen keys and screws and stuff like that. It's all press fitted in. So, but I'm just using what I have to give you an idea, and I'm hoping that the camera is where it should be. Okay, so now we have our fiberglass rod, and it is in the mount, which is going to screw into the mount on the vehicle, which is connected to the CB or your transmitter. So that's what we have so far. Now, where do we go from there? Well, I had it right in front of me until I walked away to get the Allen keys, and I dropped it on the floor. So then what they do is they determine what they want to do as far as wavelength. Now, wavelength has a lot to do with the distance, the height, the gain, you know, and just all in all, the transmission. However, that's also relative because of the location. Now, you may be in a region that's filled with mountains, so you using one type of wavelength versus somebody that lives in open country, you know, would use a different type because it's just the way that it's going to work. And I've done a video on that before, but before I go any further with this, if we have our little vehicle here with our little antenna on it, and this kind of goes for the house too, but we're talking cars right now. It's a little bit different for houses, but relatively the same. If we take a quarter wavelength antenna, which is 100, well, it's not 102-inch steel whip. Quarter wave is 9 feet and 11 meters, 8.5 feet, 9 feet. Steel whip is basically considered a quarter wave for 11 meters. And it works on 10 meters as well. What's nice about steel whips is that you don't have to do any adjustments to them. You know, you just have a good mount, good ground, and it's going to work. And it's going to take a considerable amount of power. But anyway, quarter wave. Quarter wave shoots high and comes down short. Now, I'm not going to give you miles, you know, but basically that's how it works. So if you lived in a mountain region and you're down inside the valley here, you're going to need that to get over. Then there's a number of them in between. I'm going to go for 3 of the basics. Then you have a half wave, which goes up, not as high as a quarter wave, but it goes out further. Now again, if we were in that mountain region, this may affect us depending on how low we are and how high that mountain is, as well as how far away that mountain is, because naturally as the mountain moves further away, it gets smaller and we're going to get over it, you follow? Then they have a 3/4 wave, which is not as high, but it goes out further. Then they have full waves, and they have ones that are in between, 7/16, 7/8, 5/8 wave, I mean all kinds of wavelengths. You know, antenna companies are just like anything else. If they can make a change to make more money, they're going to do it. You know, and it's whatever fits, again, your region. You know, so anyway, that's kind of how wavelengths work. Now let's talk back to the antenna. Fiberglass antenna. The fiberglass is stuck into the flange. This is what screws into the mount on your car. This is considered the hot side of the antenna. From this point out and everything that this screws into. Alright, that's all considered the hot side. Now we take that. Now this is not going to transmit. So what the antenna companies do is that you're not seeing. We're going to look at this as being a solid piece of copper. This is copper wire and it's solid. Now it's not, but that's what we're going to call this. This is a solid piece of copper. Now antenna companies use different gauge, anywhere from 16 gauge down to 12 gauge, and that even sometimes you're not going to see too much of. But again, the gauge of the wire is solid. What they do is they tack it on down here and they solder it to the flange right here. So that's soldered. The rod is only there to hold the wire up. See what I'm doing? And as it gets to the end, then they start making it tighter. And then it starts looking like this. Alright, it starts becoming a little coil of sort. Alright, now this is not going to stay because I haven't got it taped, but you kind of get the idea. And this is going to be all the way up to the top. And depending on the wavelength will depend upon the length of the wire that they're coiling up here. So basically, that's what you have. Alright. You guys seeing this? I don't know. Alright. And then, like I say, depending on the wavelength will depend on the length of the wire and where they actually start putting this coil. Because if it's too long, the coil will start down here more. Alright. And then it goes up nice and tight and so on. And again, it's tacked and soldered down here to the flange. Now once that's all done, they put a plastic sheathing over it, and then most of the time it's a heat shrink material, so they just heat it up, in the oven, and it just tightens up. Now if you look at the antenna, you'll see the black, the red, whatever the cover is, and then you'll see this underneath it. You'll feel it. You'll see it. Alright, because the heat shrinks tighten up around it. That's tightening up to hold this in place, basically. Alright, and that's how that works. So what are you transmitting off of? You're transmitting off the wire. And that's what's connected down here. It's soldered on the bottom. So you're not transmitting off of fiberglass. The fiberglass is just an element of the antenna that's holding the actual part of the wire, which is the transmitting side of the antenna. So that's what it is. So the wavelength will depend upon the length of the wire. Now fiberglass antennas, because of the loads are relatively high up here on the top, towards the top of the antenna, will determine as to where it's going to be placed. So a lot of these antennas are made because of placement. Not everybody has the perfect place for the perfect antenna. So they make these different antennas to try to accommodate the user, as well as naturally making money, but it's to accommodate the user. That's why you see a lot of fiberglass. Well, you used to. Times have changed. I've been out of the business for a long time, and I'm sure things have changed since then, but usually the fiberglass antennas were used a lot with the big rigs because it would help them get the height that they needed to get around the box behind them, because they want to kind of transmit or over the top of that box. And that's why sometimes they went into the co-phasing system as well. It was more to help them with gain naturally in distance, but also to help them get around the box behind them. So that's how that kind of worked. So there's also an app on the phone. It's called Antenna Tool, I think. Let's see here. Oops, Antenna Tools. I believe that's what it is. Yeah, Antenna Tool. It's a round blue circle with a little tower in the middle of it. Alright, and there's an app in there. Now what you would do is on the top you would put your frequency. Now CB frequencies start at your high one, 26.9965, something like that. I'm not exactly sure, but it's, again, it fails me now. And it goes as high as 27.405. Alright, so 27.405 is actually channel 40. And you can follow that all the way down. For instance, like there's a couple what they call RC channels in the way. But once you start getting above 25, 26 up in that area, they start kind of like going in rotation. basically like 27 285 27 what the hell would it be? Yeah, like, well, 405. All right, that's channel 40. So 27 405, you know, and so on. You have to excuse me here. I'm trying to think of everything at the same time, and it's been a while. But anyway, this antenna tool will help you. Now, I know you're not seeing it very clearly from where we are, and the lens may even be fogging up a little bit because it's getting sticky out here. But if I was to put in there 27150, and I'm going to just call it channel 15, even though it's probably not, because again, there's RC channels in the way. I put that in there, then I pick what I want as far as the antenna. Do I want a vertical, dipole, inverted V, whatever I want? Well, naturally I want a vertical. And then it gives me the length. Quarter wave length is 4.3 inches. I'm sorry, eighth of a wave. Quarter wave is 8.62. Remember I told you 8.5 to 9 feet. Quarter wave, steel whip. 3/8, half, 5/8, 3/4, 7/8, full wave, but it gives you the lengths. So if you wanted to try to experiment a little bit and build your own antenna on a piece of fiberglass, and you had means of putting it into the flange so that it's going to hold, all you got to do is get yourself a piece of solid wire, you know, 12, 14 gauge. Oh, here goes my afternoon train. I'm like clockwork out here. Yeah. Anyway, you get yourself a piece of solid copper wire, preferably stripped. You know, if it has a clear, like a lacquer finish on it, that's okay. But you don't want it to have the coating on it. You know, the rubber or plastic. You know what I mean. But you can pick that up at any Home Depot in the electrical department. And you can even run it as high as 12 and even 10 gauge. I mean, it depends on what you want to do. But you got to remember, you got to fit it onto the antenna rod. All right? And naturally, you want something a little bit longer because you're not going to fit a lot of wire on this. And again, if you start making it too short, you're going to end up with problems because it's going to start reflecting off of other things and you may not get your SWRs right. You know, they make 3-foot antennas, 4 foot, 5 foot, 6, 7 feet, you know, and so on. Because that also depends upon where you're going to put it on your vehicle. Yeah, but that's why all that works. Now, myself, I like steel. I don't care for fiberglass unless I have to use fiberglass, unless I have to have it up here. All right. For instance, if I was putting this on my van and I had a 5-foot or a 4-foot antenna, I'm not going to want to put it. Are you seeing this? Yeah. I'm not going to want to put it on the bumper of the van because it's only going to be sticking up like this and it's not going to do anything for me. So I'm going to have to get it above the van. So, okay, so then I may put it on the mirror so I can get the top part at least above the van. You know, where it's got the tighter wrap of the antenna. All right, and that would be above the van. So that's going to give me what I need. You know, if it's down here, it's just transmitting into the van. It's not going to do anything for me. So placement of the antenna is going to determine. I like steel. However, steel may not be appropriate if, you know, if I was going to put it on, we'll say, a big rig. For instance, let's say a K40. You take a K40, it's got its load. It's got its little steel antenna. It sticks up about 40 inches. And it's got its mount. And the mount's actually a quick disconnect mount, so it comes off, and it's got the little trunk lip on here with the 2 screws. Well, if I put this down here on this mirror, as much as I like steel, that's not going to work. You follow? Because the load is down here, so it's, even though it's transmitting off the whole antenna, I'm going to have some problems with it. So I want to get that load up here. So the best way to do it is either go like a Wilson 500 now, or a Wilson 1000. They make a number of different types of antennas in steel. But if not, I'd have to go to fiberglass to get it up here. Now the K40 I like. Well, I used to. I don't know how they are anymore. And if I remember right, they take around 250 watts of power. I'm not positive, so you'd have to check, because if you're going to run amplifiers, you don't want to blow your antenna up, because if you blow your antenna up, you're going to blow the amplifier up and the radio up. And not poof, like blow up, but you're going to blow what they call the power amplifiers, the PA, not public address, power amplifier, or sometimes they call it the final output transistor, an amplifier. Sometimes they call them the pills. You know, I mean, there's a number of different things, but you're going to end up blowing those things, and it could cost you $40, $50, $60 to fix your CV, and a lot more sometimes to fix the amplifier. Now, amplifiers are illegal. Anything over 4 watts of dead key is illegal, all right, on the output side. If you see something where it says 5-watt audio, well, that's the incoming, that's the receive. When you turn your volume up, like a stereo, if you've got 100 watts, you're hearing up to 100 watts, well, that's your receive. In reality, 4 watts out with 100% audio is within the legal limits. But naturally, CB has kind of gone amok, so you need sometimes more power. So you want to make sure the antenna is rated for that. Then they make the Wilson 1000, which is also a good antenna, which is a little bit bigger. The way that connects is the same with the trunk mount. Now, either one of these will also go through the roof or through the trunk. You don't have to lip it on. You can drill a hole if you want. They all have to be connected to a metal trunk or a metal body. All right, you can't put these on fiberglass vehicles. And then it's got its steel whip. And this is the Wilson 1000. Now, the Wilson 1000 came out with another one where it has this type of a base. It's got a piece of steel rod that goes up about 18 inches or so. Then it has this load up here, and then the steel whip. So that would work here, because then the load would be here and the steel whip would be up here, you know. So basically, it's not so much what's the best antenna, it's going to be what's the best antenna for the application. They're all going to work for you, and they're going to work best if it's in the location that it should be in. Like I say, you could take a Wilson or a K40. Wilson takes 1,000 watts, by the way. You could take a Wilson or a K40, and if you put it on the mirror or low, it's not going to work. Now, it works fine on the trunk, because naturally the back glass is, out of the way. And at that point you're all set. But or on the roof. But if you put it on a mirror mount on the side of a van or something, the K40 is just not going to cut it as well as the fiberglass top load. So, like I say, it all depends. Personally, I like steel. I use steel whenever I can. On the back of my van, I put well, they call it a 102-inch whip, but it's really 102 after they add the 6-inch spring. The whip's like 96 inches or so. But at that point, I put the steel whip, because the whole antenna is transmitting, and I'm up above the roof enough, and it's okay, and it works. All right. Now, would it work better if I had something on the trunk? Probably. I haven't got a trunk, though. I got a van. My mirrors, I can't put anything on my mirrors because it's got the plastic mirrors, and that's another thing you got to worry about with grounding. Now, I'm not trying to divert here, but you take your Chevy mirrors, some of the old Suburbans and not the Broncos, but your Suburbans, your Cheyennes, all those kind of things. Looking at the mirror sideways, the mount used to look something like this, and then the mirror would come up like this, and then you'd have the mirror on the end of that. Well, there's what they call a 3-way mirror mount that will hold this to the mirror. And basically what it is just a mount like that, and it's got the stud where the wire screws in and the antenna screws into this. This has U-clamps to clamp around the mirror. Well, that's the door. This particular mirror is not grounded. This is metal. This is metal or aluminum, and the mirror may even be metal or aluminum, but this is not grounded. All right, so when you snap your antenna onto here, you think that you're grounded to the door and everything, and you're not. Because inside of that, there's a flange type thing, and it looks something like this. and the antenna, not the antenna, but the mirror goes down inside here. So if we were looking at it inside that head on, it looks something like this, and then we'd have another piece, and this would be out more, and then this would be in more. So this is sticking out like, and then the rod goes down in between the two pieces, which is here. Well, in here, around the mirror, they put, this is the bottom part of the mirror now, they put a plastic sleeve so that it can move around, so you can adjust it. So because of that plastic sleeve being on the base part of this tube here that you're looking at, it's not grounded. Yeah. See? And sometimes you even got to worry about how they put them in the door. At one time, what they did was they would just drill holes in the door, and they'd put those plastic little connectors in there, so when they screw in, the connector widens and tightens up inside the door. So sometimes you can't even count on the mirror being bolted to the door properly because it's actually bolted into plastic. As is sometimes the roof mounts on your vehicles. Sometimes they're not screwed right into the roof. They're screwed into those little plastic gizmos. Alright, so when it screws in, it opens up. You know, or that way, or it opens up this way, but whatever way it opens up. So you're screwing into plastic, you're not screwing into metal. So you want to have an ohm meter so that you can check from here to inside the door frame someplace, as well as if you're going on your roof mount, you want to check it being metal, making sure it's metal to start with and it's not plastic, making sure that it, or that screw that you're screwing down into, is connected to some type of the chassis inside a door or something. Because if not, you're not going to have a good ground and nothing's going to work. So, but that kind of explains the antennas. Like I say, I like steel. Most of your amateur radio operators use steel or aluminum, aircraft aluminum and things on their big antennas and stuff. You know, and we also use antennas with loads, all right, because of the frequencies that we cover. It's hard to find just one antenna that's going to do it all. So what they have is they may have one steel rod or aluminum rod, and they may have different traps on it. And the traps, depending upon where they are in the line, will determine what frequency they're on, and they may correspond using the other trap. So for instance, if this is the steel antenna and the trap is here, this trap is utilizing this. There's another trap up here. Well, this trap may be just utilizing the antenna steel, but it may be help to utilize this one as well, so we're talking off of both of them to gain a frequency. Like I say, it goes on and on and on, so to make this short and sweet, it's really hard. But again, I go for steel. However, I will go fiberglass if it means me changing to a location, because a fiberglass in the right location is going to work better than steel in a bad location. All right. So I hope that helps you a little bit, you know. And if you have an old radio and you have an SWR meter and you want to get you know, start getting experimental, go to Home Depot or something, Lowe's, and pick yourself up, you know, 100 feet or 50 feet of solid copper. You may have to take the sheathing off it or something, but solid copper. Pick yourself up, you know, if you got an old fishing pole, a heavier one though. You don't want something real light because you don't want to be doing this. You know, and at that point, try it. Solder it to a flange. You can buy these, all right. Solder the wire to this. Make sure it's nice and tight. Alright, and then start your wrap, and when you get near the top, wrap it up and use different lengths. Alright, and you can find the lengths that you need on that antenna app, antenna tool app. You know, and experiment. As long as you got an SWR meter in line and you do it quickly, and you have to remember you got to recalibrate every time you do it because it's going to change. So you always have to recalibrate. And then try it. You know, trial and error. But if you're just going to buy, you know, depending on the vehicle. If you're going to go on the mirrors, make sure they're grounded, and fiberglass is probably going to be your best move. You know, if you've got a vehicle and you don't care, you're going to go through the roof, well then, I would probably go with a Wilson or a K40. Now the Wilsons are a little bit better constructed. K40s, if they hit a lot, they're going to have a habit of snapping the coil. Water then gets in it, stuff like that. But again, it depends. If you're going on the trunk, Wilson or K40 or fiberglass, right? But if, depending on the trunk, if you have some of these older cars, like the old Rivieras, they'd have their trunk, and then the back window was just like this. Well, the trunk is here. Well, the window's not going to interfere that much. The roof isn't going to interfere too much. But, that one versus the window that goes like that, all right, a little bit better. Sometimes the trunk isn't always the place to go. Sometimes the part between the trunk and the back window. You have your trunk lip, and then you have the piece of the car, and then you have the back window. Well, if you can get up underneath here so you can get through and drill it into there, boof, well, that's going to be your best bet up over this, as long as it's grounded. And while you're under there, check it from that, because that's metal, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be good ground on either side. So you want to make sure, always check your grounds. That's all there is to it. I hope that helped you. I don't want to start diverting and getting off track, but like I say, it's not a simple answer. There's more to it, and it just leads on and on and on. But all right, check your antennas, see what they're loaded at, and also there's a thing called gain. Not all antennas rate the gain, but if you see a gain where it says dB gain, all right, and let's just say it's a 2 dB gain. Well, again, an easy way to explain it, it's not always going to be the correct way, but the easy way to explain it would be gain is almost like a multiplication factor. So if we have 4 watts coming out of the back of the radio, we may not have 4 watts at the antenna. It's like your car, you got 500 horsepower. Well, the wheels, you may only have 390 horsepower. You follow? So the radio may have 4 watts coming out of it, but by the time it zigzags and goes through the antenna, it may only be 3 watts. Well, your gain, what it does is it takes whatever the wattage is at the antenna and it like multiplies it. So this would multiply it times 2. So if we had 3 watts, that means the antenna is an equivalent to a 6 watt output. You follow? If it was 4 watts, it would be an 8 watt output. So gain also helps. The higher the gain, naturally the better. But again, we're talking automobiles, so sometimes it's tough. All right. And again, that's just an easy way of trying to explain it to you. So anyway, I hope that helps you somewhat. All right. And again, I'm not trying to not. It's just that it just takes, sometimes it just takes more to go than what I have actual time to give. Again, this is a real busy week for me. Today is what? Today is Wednesday. They pushed my sleep study ahead, so I actually had a sleep study last night. I didn't make it all the way through it because the air conditioning crapped out on them, and the next thing you know, it's 90 degrees inside and everybody's sweating, and so, we just all got up and left. So that didn't work, and I don't even know if I'm going to go back for another one, because I had one 4 years ago already, or 3 years ago, so not even then, it's probably 2 years ago. And then I have some more appointments coming up on Friday with the doctors, just to go through the checkups. So I'm a little busy this week, but I hope that helps you. Have a good one.